everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, and we are back with another Twitter thread. What did this person say? You aren't verified? Damn straight. Anyway, today we are talking about decks that were specifically good in Master Duel. The TCG and the OCG follow the same release schedule, albeit a couple of months apart, but because Master Duel gets to curate its card pool a little bit more, they have the unique ability through both release order and weird ban list math to ensure that certain decks are playable for shorter, longer, or in different iterations than they ever were in any other format. Today I want to talk about specific Master Duel oddities, decks that were outsized in terms of their power level compared to how they performed in the TCG and the OCG. And I'm going to begin with what MDM believes is the best deck at present, this Fiendsmith Control Dippity build. There was, for a very short period of time, a Fiendsmith Control deck that was pretty successful in the TCG and the OCG. I'm talking about the one that played White Dust on, sometimes Kashtira's, Fiendschmidt adjacent. Unfortunately, it was sandwiched between Ryziel and Malice in the release of Blue Eyes, and after the release of Blue Eyes, there wasn't really a reason to be playing these cards over the much more impressive Blue Eyes suite alongside Primite. Here, the tools available to the more generic decks are more expansive. The board's a lot less powerful because Malice and Ryziel don't yet exist, and as a result, there is a home for a strategy like this one that wants to cycle the little boy in a jar. So, let's see what you all came up with. First up is CJ with what I think is probably the right answer. To be clear, if you are watching this at present, it is June 3rd, 2025. In about 2 months, this isn't going to make sense, but it was released well before the release of Holy Sue. The short of it is that Vanquished Soul was never a particularly good deck in the TCG. I would call it maybe a top 6 within its own release format. It was largely underplayed because it was so randomly expensive. Remember, it was in, I think, the set with Valmonica in it, and they were like, okay, like, obviously only Vanquished Soul is going to be good out of here, so let's make all the cards as ultra rare as possible. No, it was with the Burgers and the Transcendosaurus. Anyway, first wave Vanquished Soul was nothing to write home about because they didn't have access to Xiaolong, but in Master Duel, there were two things going for it. Firstly, they got all of their shit at once, which meant that you could play a deck at its full power level on release, something that Master Duel's done a couple of times, and I really love when they do. I hate having to wait around for them to release the good card of the archetype. And secondly, in the TCG, this deck wasn't as popular because there's not a consistently good Earth monster to reveal for Caesar Valius. This deck was playing like Pantera, sometimes it'd play Ghost Bell in order to consistently have something to show off, but in Master Duel, you had 3 Maxi. As a result, this deck was dick fuck everywhere the week of its release and was arguably a top 3, if not top 1 strategy upon release. It was really strong and playable during a DC Cup, which means it is forever emblazoned in history as a prominent strategy during an important event. Love that they did this. This is, I think, the gold standard for not only this thread, but for Master Duel's release order changes. Like, this should be something that we see frequently. Foxcade has a pretty good one. Because of how Master Duel releases stuff in batches, Mathmech got to be top dog in Master Duel for a minute before Tier nuked it off the tier list. It's weird to talk about Mathmech as a bad deck, but in the TCG, it's never been fantastic. One of its biggest moments of prominence was during its release format, that's Power of the Elements, in which it was an early contender for a top strategy in the same format that the first wave of Tier and Sprite were released, mostly because it was easy to figure out how to build. Like, Mathmech Circular does so much on its own, but it's so specific in what it does, and what it does is so linear, there's not a lot of room to, like, move around and play and, like, get better at the deck as it gets more iterated upon. I loved this strategy and beat it to death in the build-up to YCS Niagara, 2022, 2023? Unfortunately, I had to pivot at the last moment because after a couple of weeks of playing with the strategy, it just became completely clear it could not hold a candle to Sprite or Tier Lament. But in Master Duel, this released way earlier than those two, and as a result, this deck was absolutely everywhere. There were no Bestials, which give it a huge problem. It's arguable, but the deck does have a decent line into Max C. It draws them, I think, 2 cards, but gets you access to the 3-mat Laplacian. I liked this a lot, and I wish they had done it more, letting the less powerful of the 3 top archetypes from Pote have a little time in the sun before it was completely shut back into the closet. Millennium is a good answer as well. Dustin plays in the OCG, and I'm so happy they've showed up to this. Millennium did see one-offs here in the OCG just as Macrocosmos deck, but in Best of 1, without the variance and no sideboarding back row hate, it performed a lot better in Master Duel, with Doom Dragon, Heart of the Blue Eyes released at the same time too. Another situation where they got all of their support in the first wave, Heart of the Blue Eyes, of course, being a piece of legacy support support released in other territories. This deck is super accessible to new players because it takes so few actions and it's so clear what it does. And in Master Duel, it was very, very popular at its release. It remains popular to this day, despite the fact that I think it's been like a year in the TCG since I've seen someone activate Millennium Ankh. iWish plays a lot of high elo Master Duel, and I'm happy that they've showed up to this as well. In the top 100 rating, every single month, about 5% of it is totally washed by this strategy, which sees no experimentation or discussion in the TCG, or to my understanding, the OCG. It's just penned pile. It's so strange. It's just all of the good Pendulum cards released in the last couple of years, alongside like turn-ending hand traps and Ostinato, which for some reason is totally legal. The sideboard here just represents a lot of the options that this deck has, and the extra deck is like, you can use the Firewall Brothers to do whatever you want. It can also crack the Firewall board in Engine. There's a bajillion variations. TBH, this might still be good. Every month, people are topping with this strategy. We just don't talk about it. Dimax has a great one. Shout out to the 13 card extra. This is such a Master Duel oddity. So if you're unfamiliar with what's going on here, at the very genesis of Master Duel, some people coded a bot that would farm gems all day by just playing games, trying to win on the first turn, failing that scoop. And the way it did was it played an FTK that involved activating Banquet of Millions, banishing your entire extra deck, and then flipping 2 DD Dynamite, which would do 8,000 points of damage, provided you were playing a 15 card extra deck. So as a result, during early Master Duel, players would just play a 13 card extra deck, which prevented you from dying to the Banquet of Millions FTK on the off chance they ran into it because it would represent a free win. Ridiculous, man, right? Do you know this card is still semied? Poston says might be stretching the prompt, but there was a tier 0 Bestial Dragon Link format in Master Duel where we never got anything close in the TCG due to the banning of Chaos Ruler and the release schedule of Vsauce and his Bestials in the TCG. Okay, so I do want to mention that Dragon Link was good in the TCG. You know, I said that I want Master Duel exclusive decks, and it's not surprising to see Dragon Link because Dragon Link was good in the TCG and the OCG as well. However, the scale to which Dragon Link was good in Master Duel was unthinkable. Why was this card alive as long as it was? They left this guy legal for like a year after he should have been banned, and oh man, it was atrocious. This era of Dragon Link felt so smooth, it was almost impossible to fuck up any line. You always had a no shit button in Chaos Ruler, and it was just so absolutely dominant. Calling it tier 0 feels like a misnomer. It definitely was just a tier 1 deck, but it was such a smooth tier 1 deck. And it's not often that Dragon Link gets to play the amount of hand traps that this deck got to. So Rongo Nimiad was powerful both in the TCG and the OCG as well. In the TCG, it was part of like this Dark Warrior format that used Rusty Bardish to enable this card, but it was so irritating in Master Duel because it was being played in a super simplistic way, and that is you would just get it off of Numbers Evile. You would just get it off of Numbers Evile. You would activate Numbers Evile, you would get Rongo Nimiad. You played like Salesman, call Rongo Nimiad so its effect wouldn't trigger, and he would just sit on your board and no one could ever summon and you couldn't summon, and you just looked at your opponent. It was like Last Warrior Turbo. This was a super, super popular deck on ladder, and it was so fucking annoying every time you ran into it because it's not good. It's not even remotely good, but it was there. It was there. This is a decent one. Argo Stars is really popular in Master Duel right now. I would argue that has nothing to do with Master Duel's release date and has 100% to do with the fact that Master Duel's user base is different from the user base of the TCG. There are people who are like, I want to play the sexy anime lady deck regardless of how powerful it is. In the TCG, those people usually make it out to one local and they're like, okay, I've had my fun, time to play a real deck. In Master Duel, they can just keep playing this forever. There are a couple of quirks in the Master Duel ban list that make this a little more playable. You can go like MX Saber Invoker with any 2/3s to get to Glorious Adra, but the deck sucks. This poster Kurt M is talking about like, oh, well, it was released before Ryziel and Malice, where in the TCG they came out at the same time, and it isn't competitive versus those decks. Make no mistake, this isn't competitive versus the current suite of Master Duel decks either. It's just that there's more Gooners. This isn't even really a Gooner deck. It's just, I don't know what compels people to play this deck. She looks kind of like Miku. Master Duel represents a really unique opportunity when it comes to release order. It enables decks that weren't popular in the TCG or the OCG, not by virtue of power level, by virtue of context, to actually have their day in the sun. And for that, I like it. That said, there's a significant amount of times where that cuts against them. Yeah, why don't we keep Super Heavy Samurai legal for another 50 formats? I want to specifically shout out this individual, Shark Monarch 69. Replied to the Blue Sky thread with, "These replies are so bad, oh my god. 90% are meta decks that were out before they were out in Master Duel. Look at these replies. Runic Stun on ladder. This deck topped a ton as a stun deck in the OCG. Crooked Cook. Both MBT and Doug have stories about this deck. It topped many regionals since 2022. Dragon Maid. The prompt said Master Duel only. This was a meta deck in the OCG for months." Listen, I gotta be honest. I knew this was gonna happen. Thank you for fighting the good fight. You might as well be talking to a brick wall.